What's up, wrestling fans? Welcome to another Pay-Per-Viewpoint edition of the Smark Moment Smack Talk podcast, NXT TAKEOVER WarGames, or as you should say, WarGames, is coming up this weekend. Same day as Tribute to the Troops, but we aren't doing a predictions or preview breakdown of that because we don't know anything about that. We do know the majority of WarGames, so we're going to give you the rundown of the card as far as what it is. Thursday. We're going to do it tomorrow. Wednesday afternoon here. It's around 3:15 when we're starting to record this. So there's going to be some adjustments to the card. We'll get to that a little bit later. We'll break down our predictions, talk about what we think the final card's going to look like, and everything else that we're excited about, that we're a little bit down on. The typical kind of stuff that we do here. I'm your host as always, Tony Mango. Joining me as always are Callum Wiggins.
Hello.
And Robert DeFelice.
Hey.
Oh, Miz and Martin, the wrong thing. The whole setup that we got going on here is what we normally do, and that includes wanting you to give your opinions about this and anything else you want to chime in on. So obviously, if you are not on the YouTube side of things, that is the best place for you to drop your comments. You could do it on Facebook. You could send us a tweet at SmarkOutMoment. You could do something on the page on smarkoutmoment.com or whatever. But if you're on Spotify or Amazon Music or those audio-only platforms, head on over to YouTube, and while you're over there, hit all the buttons that we got except for that dislike button. So that means the like button, the share button, the join button, the applause button, the subscribe button, the little bell notification button, all that good stuff, and also the comment button, because that's where you'll be able to leave your comments. If you don't know what the join button is, that is the same as the Patreon, and if you go to patreon.com/SmarkOutMoment, you can check out all of the ways that you can support us on those different tiers. $1 is greatly appreciated, especially during this whole coronavirus and everything. But there are also the $5 ad block forgiveness tier. There is the $10 and up Darkcast tiers. They give you the special Patreon exclusive episodes. We've got the Pick Your Poison tier. So if you want us to talk more NXT, more War Games, go back and do a fan announce table of one of the previous War Games, like the fantastic women's one from last year, for instance, then that is something that you can request through that method. And any kind of things that you guys do to support us in any fashion is also just considered absolutely awesome. I'll get into another way that you can help out a little bit with some feedback in a bit, and a couple other things as well. But let's talk about the way that we normally go about this beginning of this, which is the unknowns. Right now we have 4 matches on the card. One of them is missing one teammate, but we'll break down that teammate when we get to that match because it's very obvious who it's going to be. Normally, NXT events have 5 matches. Sometimes, very rarely, there are 6. And also, in some situations, there are sometimes just 4. And we've had 3 previous TakeOver WarGames events. And in the past, there has been 4 matches instead of 5 for not last year's, because last year's they had 5 with one of them being on the pre-show, if I remember correctly. And then the 2018 event, they had actually 8 matches, but they didn't really do things the way that they did at that. And they recorded some matches that would air on an episode of NXT, so it's not really quite the same. It's more so that they had 5 matches. And then the 2017 one, that one, I think it was 4, wasn't it? Maybe it was 5 actually too. There was some event where they did 4. I thought that it was this one. Maybe it wasn't the case. I'm assuming we get a 5th match. And I'm assuming that match is Tommaso Ciampa versus Timothy Thatcher.
Yeah. I mean, there's not much to say there.
Yeah, they've been building that. It seems likely that will be the match. There's not really anything else they've already got in place at the moment to throw in there ahead of that one.
No, I mean, there's like the tag titles are caught up in the War Games match. The NXT North American Championship has its match. The Finn Balor situation doesn't seem like it's something that they're particularly focused on. I mean, we know that he had been out with an injury for a while, and he claims that he's back, but they did the kind of thing that they typically do where they buy themselves some extra time, where Finn Balor's appearance on this most recent episode that he was on was 2 weeks ago, And all he said was, I'm back in action, and I'm going to lead into the next segment. He never said who his next opponent was, when he was going to wrestle again. They didn't set anything up.
He also said he was a cat.
Yeah, he's been really harping on the cat stuff a lot recently. It's I don't know what the deal is with that, but he's just like, the cat's back, and cat's got claws, and I don't know.
Stay out of my litter, I believe he said.
He's just like watching old Batman, Adam West things and bringing Catwoman lines out instead. What's the matter? Cat got your tongue? Like that kind of thing.
That's coming tonight.
There was a little bit of a tease that Karrion Kross might be working his way back into the mix on social media. I think he's like training or something. I don't think that that's going to happen anytime real soon. I think that they're literally going to do whatever they can to drag out this Finn Balor thing a little bit longer. I'm not anticipating him to wrestle in any fashion this year for the remaining part of this year. But if he does, it's going to be on NXT. I mean, obviously on NXT, he's the NXT champion, but you know what I mean, television instead of
on TV. He's not going to do a takeover.
Yeah, I think that that'll be their hook of like, oh, Finn Balor's going to defend the title on like the Christmas edition or whatever it might be. Nobody's set up. That's the thing. Like, Kross may not be back in time. Rich Holland is injured, and I mean, they're not going to just be like suddenly out of nowhere, Boa gets a title shot or something. So, not anticipating anything to happen there. The NXT Women's Championship is not on the line yet, but I mean, they'll bury one of the leads here. She's the person in the Team Shotzi, right?
I would assume.
Mm-hmm.
So there goes that title, which means that there's really nothing other than Ciampa and Thatcher. They could, technically speaking, throw like a Kushida match on there, or they could throw.
But isn't there like a Legado del Fantasma match they can do?
Well, they could do. Isn't Kurt Stallion the number one contender at the moment for the Cruiserweight Championship?
He is, but they've been harping a lot on that being like representational of 205 Live. So I'm assuming that they're saving that for that show.
Oh, so nobody will watch it rather than a couple of hundred.
Yeah, I think they'll do it on the takeover if they do it.
I think that that's going to be one of their attempts to get people to watch the TV show.
No, they know that nobody's going to watch.
Yeah. Live. If you want people to watch 205 Live, you need to actually put it on a show that people will watch, and say you can see more of this action on 205 Live, and then maybe you'll get like 10 people tune in.
Yeah, that's the problem. I think that they probably know at this point that even if they do that, they've done it enough times that people would watch it if they cared.
Yeah, but it's just a case of like with the 205 Live thing, it's nobody's going to be interested in watching a thing on 205 Live with Kurt Stallion, who, unless you've been watching 205 Live, you have no idea who he is.
Believe me, I agree with you guys. I'd rather put it on the pay-per-view. I'm always much more into the idea of the pay-per-view.
I mean, realistically, if they wanted to get some attention, they should put it on TV, not on pay-per-view. It should really be on the next episode of NXT if they can do that.
They might do that too. I mean, Stallion has popped up in NXT, if I remember correctly. I don't remember exactly when, but I'm pretty sure that he wrestled at least one match there. They seem to kind of like go a little bit into like the forgetful zone when it comes to that. Like, not very many people from 205 seem to be on NXT on a regular basis, whereas NXT people go on 205 Live. Like, I don't remember the last time that the Bollywood Boys actually wrestled on NXT. Yet they're a part of the roster. And the Brian Kendrick, I was going to say instead of the Brian Kendrick, he's never a part of NXT, and that guy would be a great asset for that brand. Like, the Brian Kendrick against Kushida for that, sure. Kendrick against Gargano would be fun, and it seems like all they ever want is like Arya Daivari is just a 205 Live guy. He doesn't wrestle elsewhere. Tony Nese, you're all over the place. You're on every freaking roster at some point. Like, it's odd, but I'm not anticipating Stallion versus Santos Escobar on that.
They need another match. Like, this card is a little light.
Well, they got the Thatcher and Ciampa thing, and that'll be the fifth match. And then
they only need 5 matches because both WarGames are going to go over half an hour. So
yeah,
you can't add more matches to it really.
What's the fourth match that I'm forgetting?
There's the
strap match, I assume.
Yeah, the strap
No,
match.
there's a strap match. There's
The North
a
American Championship triple threat match.
Okay, that's the one. Yep, that's it. Okay, so maybe they don't need it.
Yeah, I mean, they've got enough gimmicks going on. 2 WarGames matches, a strap match, a triple threat match, and then whatever the 5th match ends up being. I think they're better off saving the Cruiserweight title for a television episode. But maybe it happens, I don't know. If that does happen, Escobar retains, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
As far as Thatcher and Ciampa goes, I'm interested in this feud. I think that they haven't really done anything super crazy great yet, but it's kind of just sort of heating up. And I like both the guys, so I'm cool with that. Not going to be the most anticipated match of the card for me, but that's kind of hard to say when you got 2 WarGames matches on there. But I would assume that Ciampa wins.
I wouldn't say I'm interested in the feud. I'm interested in the match. Like, the build to it's been whatever. It's been, hey, I don't have a problem with you. Oh, yeah? Well, we'll see about that. That's what this feud has been. So I like the idea of having a good match. I think Ciampa, of the core NXT people, so like, your Coles, Garganos, Ciampa, Dream, and Balor, Ciampa's suffered the most this year. And that's simply because he kind of feels like background noise even on NXT. And that just doesn't feel right.
Out of these two, I mean, I am slightly interested in the feud because the feud's built around the idea that Ciampa, it says that there's a lot of people pretending to be tough in the locker room, and then he goes after a guy who, I guess, pretends
He's
to be
legitimately
tough.
tough.
Well, no, he's legitimately tough in real life, but I guess the story they're trying to tell is the fact that Ciampa loses big matches against people actually on the NXT roster, and so gets his jollies by beating up people that try outs. So he's not really tough; he's just a bully.
You mean Thatcher?
Yeah, Thatcher. Yeah, that's what I mean. But so that's why I think that the story's kind of going with that, is that Ciampa sees Thatcher as a fake tough guy, a guy that just wants to beat up people that he knows he can beat up, but then when he's actually taking on someone his own size or someone of an equal skill level, he always comes up short. That's kind of been Thatcher's story in NXT, is that, yeah, he has I mean, I like his work, he does the Thatcher's can stuff, and he does strike me as a guy they could legitimately push and do something with, but he seems to just go into matches on takeovers or big events to lose all the time. And I can't really look at this one and say that that's going to be any different here. So I don't really know kind of what Thatcher's trajectory is right now. He just seems like, I think he's very quickly transitioning into a Cassius Ohno territory.
Nope, I think Thatcher wins. If Thatcher doesn't win here, this will be the cutoff point for me. I think he wins here, and if he doesn't, then he's going to be the gatekeeper that Ohno was and have the losing record that Ohno had.
I mean, he did beat Matt Riddle.
Yeah,
that was his only win.
Yeah, that feels like 5 years ago at this point.
But
yeah,
that shows that they at least cared enough to give him a win for a
against
big
the guy who was
talent.
leaving the promotion.
Yeah, but I mean, when you're leaving the promotion, you don't always lose. Look at like Asuka didn't lose to Ember Moon.
No, she got injured. She got injured and moved up.
The
only ones that really didn't lose are the War Raiders.
War Raiders. I couldn't remember the name that they had used at the time. I was like the Viking guys. I was gonna say. I was like, that's not right.
But realistically, most people lose on their way up, and that was just what Matt Riddle's time was, and he was feuding with Thatcher, and so they gave Thatcher the win. But every single big match he's had since then, he's lost.
Yeah, I would be totally cool with him winning. Ciampa, I think, could use a little bit of a win too, just to kind of restabilize himself. And then again, he's a multi-time different types of champion, so he can bounce back on his own. But
I think they should just try and make this match start to add a bit of intrigue to it, make it a number one contenders match, because Balor doesn't have a opponent.
That'd be cool.
The winner of this match face him for it.
Maybe that's even the plan too. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen tonight because all they've advertised for tonight is. I mean, unless something's changed in the last little bit of time, it's just been Shotzi versus Raquel Gonzalez, I think. I don't remember them.
Match?
That's like, I think that's it, right?
Yeah, I think
another fucking ladder match.
Yeah, this is just it's the tradition now. It's what they do.
I saw a stat on Twitter, I think Voices of Wrestling put it out there, that 10% of all WWE ladder matches in their history have taken place in 2020.
Shut the fuck up. That's not true. That cannot be true.
They've had 12 ladder matches this year.
Wow.
Well, once this NXT match takes place.
They had what? WrestleMania.
They've had WrestleMania. There was one. They've had apparently 6 in NXT this year. So that's one last week. There was the one last week. There's the one this week. There's
Shirai.
North America. Shirai won North American Championship. It was a ladder match.
There was an NXT UK one in January.
Yeah.
Huh.
So, wow. So they've had 12 ladder matches this year alone.
Jesus.
Well, someone in NXT likes it.
Coming up. They got TLC coming up.
Yeah, but see, they're not ladder matches. They're TLC matches. And,
TLC's gonna have some ladder matches too. Ladders and TLCs.
I hate that pay-per-view so fucking much. I really hate it. We'll get into that another time. I'll do my annual bitch and complain about how that doesn't make any sense. WarGames is thankfully better though. You know, like that's worth a discussion point. They haven't necessarily clarified that this is happening at the Capitol Wrestling Center, right?
They did.
They did?
They did. At some point over the weekend, I believe they clarified it.
How are they going to fit 2 rings and the cage and everything in that setup?
Well, here's the thing. They kind of have that performance center, so they can kind of just rearrange things.
They can do whatever they want.
Yeah, so basically they can just push the barricade further backwards because there aren't going to be any fans watching. So just enough that they can fit a second ring into it.
I just feel like that would be hard to move all the screens and everything and try to get that working.
Well, the screens are only on there aren't that many on like one side or the other. Really, is there? Most of them are on the hard cam side, and I assume that won't change. So I don't think it's too much of an issue to push it all the way back. And if it is, then I'm sure they've already figured out what they're going to do with it. I wouldn't be surprised if they've already figured it out, and on this episode of NXT, they have like a WarGames preview thing where they have both rings set up already. And
you got Beth Phoenix going, "This is what it's going to look like at WarGames." Just
did she get kicked in the groin or something?
That's what she typically yells like, as far as I've been hearing. It's always kind of like that higher pitched, like I don't know, like the kind of like that Vince voice in the past a little bit. Kind of reads like that to me. Like trying to sound a little bit more excited. You know, like how Vince used to always be like, "Oh, what a maneuver! Ha 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 ha!" Like, I don't think we're getting any kind of special guest commentators this week. No Kevin Owens or whatever, but yeah, I'm excited to see what happens with the WarGames thing. I'm a fan of WarGames. It's not my favorite gimmick of the year, but they have been having some amazing matches in NXT in these past few years, so I'm assuming that these are going to be great. We'll save them for the end of this discussion, though. What was our final tally when it came to Ciampa and Thatcher? If they end up doing that, I'm going Ciampa.
I'm going Ciampa.
I'm going Thatcher.
Alrighty there. Dexter Lumis and Cameron Grimes. They have been having a feud for a little while now. They've had a blindfold match. They had a Haunted House of Terror match. And now, I guess to round out the feud, it's a strap match? Seems a little underwhelming.
I am angry about this match.
Why?
Because it's going to be bad. And that's the thing. Like, if it was just on an NXT show and it was bad, it's just like, okay, it's just a bad match. This is TakeOver. TakeOver has a reputation to uphold, and this, I think, is going to be one of, if not the worst match in TakeOver history.
Because it's a strap match?
Man.
Because it's Dexter Lumis.
Yeah, I don't think Lumis is all that bad.
He's terrible. Well, it's not, the guy himself, Samuel Shaw, is not a bad wrestler. He's an okay, decent, big man wrestler. The Dexter Lumis character sucks. And I've been fortunate in the fact that I haven't really had to talk about it too much because he hasn't been on TakeOver because his gimmick shit. But it's just a case of he's just the gimmick restricts his ability to perform, and he's a no-selling creep from the creep farm. That's kind of just his gimmick. And I'm looking forward to that's a Brian Alvarez mannerism. That's how he refers to him. So I've just adopted that for this because it does just make sense because that's his only gimmick is that he's a creep, and yet he's a babyface creep that doesn't sell anything. And it's just like Like, I go into every single match that he's had with Cameron Grimes, and I'm rooting for Cameron Grimes all the time because Cameron Grimes is just a more dynamic and entertaining performer. I mean, again, I haven't really had much chance to really talk about Dexter Lumis, but I tell you, at the awards thing that we've got coming up soon, he is down at the bottom for basically every single award that I can potentially put him into.
Wow, you're really down on him. I like Cameron.
I liked his debut in the tournament because I thought he looked interesting, but then he just come back and he just does nothing. And every single feud he's part of, I just root towards the other guy because I just think he's lacking a huge amount of charisma. The no-selling thing annoys me because it's not like the 1980s or 1990s anymore. Just get over it. And if you are no-selling, you probably should be a heel instead of a baby face.
I agree on that.
And all he does is, like, he draws people, he kidnaps people. He stuffed Roderick Strong in a trunk for however many weeks or whatever it was, and he's still a good guy apparently. I don't get what his character is supposed to be or why I should be interested in it.
Now, I will agree with you on that. I don't get what his character is supposed to be. I don't really understand why he's a babyface. I would rather him be able to wrestle a different style a little bit. But I do like Dexter Lumis. I do think that he's got some positives. And I think if they do tweak a couple things, he would be a great asset somewhere down the line. And my issue with this is I don't think that you end it with a strap match. I feel like they should have ended it with that haunted house match because that was the peak of what they could have gotten out of it. The blindfold match, that didn't do anything for me. And now the strap thing's just basically kind of the same as the blindfold thing. That seems like what you lead up to. Like, the blindfold match goes first because that's kind of like, I don't know what's happening. I'm wearing a blindfold, whatever. He runs away, he being Cameron Grimes' pronouns, pal. And they set up the whole, like, well, it's a strap match because you can't get away on that one. And then something happens. And then it's like, you know what? Okay, fine. This is going to finish in a haunted house where you are, you know, all these zombies and all that. And I think that both of them should have moved on by now. So I'm not too big on this. But what I am big on is that at least we're getting more Cameron Grimes because Cameron Grimes is awesome.
Cameron Grimes has been such a joy. And admittedly, I think both of these guys are prime for the main roster. I think this match screams main roster, random gimmick, just to do it. And it highlights one of my biggest problems with NXT over the last year, and that's it's rapidly becoming, I don't want to say ECW, but it's definitely not the special brand that it was in August of last year around TakeOver Toronto.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was going to agree with that. It's just the sense of a lot of things they're doing nowadays scream the same sort of approach to the main roster, and I'm not necessarily saying that's as much of a negative in terms of, oh, just because they're doing stuff on the main roster, it's terrible. I mean, that's part of the reason, but it's just like, but the bigger issue is just the fact that NXT was slightly different than the main roster, and it meant that I felt like I was watching a slightly different sort of wrestling. And that's what I want a bit of variety. I don't want the same thing. It just feels like this is a slightly more refined version of Raw and SmackDown right now, but the trajectory is heading closer towards them than it was further away as it was previously.
So I think it was on After the Bell earlier this year where Road Dogg was gushing over Dexter Lumis and how, oh, it's such a fun and interesting character. And yes, I want to say surface level, I agree that wrestling needs to move a little bit more toward the character-driven stuff and less everybody can do a suicide dive.
Fully agreed.
But I don't know if the way we do that is by going all the way to the left and going with, well, Dexter Lumis is just a creepy stalker dude, and it's great because he's just a weird character. Like, there are better characters you can do this with. I'm not excited for this match. I have no problem with it being on TakeOver just because they needed to fill up a TakeOver, and this is perfect, you know. Cameron Grimes is afraid of him, but he can't run anywhere. I do hope Grimes wins, though, because I think there's more money in Cameron Grimes than there is in Dexter Lumis. But I will say, my gut says Dexter Lumis, so that's what I'll go with.
See, as far as I'm aware, maybe I'm not up to speed on this, but as far as I'm aware, they haven't clarified which strap match rules this is going to follow. Because there's been multiple different.
What do you mean?
There's been different ones in WWE. They've had strap matches where you can win with a pinfall, and they've had other ones where you have to tip the 4.
When's the last time you saw one that ends with a pinfall?
Wasn't that the last one?
Well, can you tell me who was in it?
I mean, I don't remember for sure. I think that maybe John Cena might have won one like that before, if I remember correctly. I'm going to try to go on maybe cage
Every
match.
match I feel like I've seen in WWE has been like, you're tied together by some apparatus, and you got to touch the 4 corners.
So Dexter Lumis and Roderick Strong have had a strap match in the past year.
Well, there you go. I don't recall that at all.
And that ended in a submission.
Oh, that's awful.
See, there you go. Like that's thing right there.
Well, then I think we just said what this match will end up like.
Well, yeah. Well, that's essentially what Dexter Lumis did in that match with Roderick Strong is hit his like choke finishing move, which essentially like
Was
the
that the
Anaconda
Great American
device.
Bash? He choked
Yeah, the Great American Bash.
Yeah, okay, I remember that now.
Yeah, and tied him up with the ropes to extra leverage to choke him out with. And so that kind of feels like, okay, they're just going to do that again.
Wow, you mean to tell me that not only are they running back another strap match in NXT, but they're doing it with the same guy in the same feud, basically?
Maybe they think that that's his gimmick.
Well, that's again, this the issue of the fact. Like, I know we were talking about earlier about like, just the idea about him having good characters and stuff like that. Dexter Lumis isn't a good character because no one knows what his character is. So it's just like, what's his motivation? What does he actually do? Why does he want to be in NXT? What is his like ambition or his goal actually? He just seems like he's just a guy that just hangs around the performance center. He's occasionally thrown into matches, and that's about it really.
But even outside of that, like I'm not sure. Like this is the baby face to be pushing. Okay, so it's a stalker whose signature match is, yeah, you can't run away from me anymore. You're tied to me. Like, what's happening here?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's just like, you say what you want about TNA, but they actually book Samuel Shaw better than WWE is booking Samuel Shaw.
This is actually the 3rd strap match this year. There was The Fiend and Daniel Bryan at Royal Rumble.
Wow,
oh, yeah, that was a pinfall as well.
So they did a pinfall submission. So I'm not anticipating that this is going to be the 4-corner type, that's the end of the match type thing. Well, if that is, then I think that Cameron Grimes has a strong chance of winning, just because they could do some kind of thing where he just gets flipped around and does that. The previous match, that's funny. There's 3 strap matches this year. The previous one before that, 2013.
Mm-hmm.
Sheamus beating Mark Henry. Then it was 2011. Then 2010, 2009, and then 2001. So in the past 10 years, they've had 7 matches, and 2 of them were previously in the same year.
Well, I think it's something that's gone under the radar this year is just how heavily WWE has relied on gimmick matches this year.
A lot of them.
And it's funny about the idea that they relied so heavily on gimmick matches this year on a year where they've basically had no fans in front of the majority of it, which means loads of people are taking ridiculous bumps off ladders and tables and stuff like that, and there's no fans to react to it.
See, that's been my thing, man. Like, stop working so hard. Like, holy shit, nobody's there.
But we know why they're doing these gimmicks. It's because on paper it might get somebody else to tune in. They're relying on that. Yeah. They're, well, it's a strap match, so tune in because you haven't seen a strap match in a while, haven't you? There's a title on the line. There's a Susquehanna Shuffle match, whatever.
Yeah, it's short-term gains in order to try and like get an immediate reaction, but over time, it's law of diminishing returns.
Mm-hmm.
If you lean too heavily on these gimmick matches and you basically make every single match or every other match a gimmick match on your show, then they all lose feeling. I mean, I was talking about the fact that they're doing another ladder match tonight, and my reaction wasn't, oh great, a ladder match. It was, oh god, another ladder match. It's just like, I should never be saying that about a ladder match in any company really. But it's just they've done it so much that there's only so much they can do with these things. I'm sure the match will be great between, is it Gonzalez and Shotzi?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm sure the match will be good, but it's just a case of, yeah, but I've seen every single ladder spot that I can potentially see in the last 11 matches that you've done this year with it.
Oh, yeah, by the way, the other ladder match at NXT was like a month ago with Candice and Io. It was the TLC match at Halloween Havoc.
Yeah. Well, if the rules for this strap match are flexible enough that it doesn't have to be pinfall or submission, I think Cameron Grimes wins. But with that in mind, that the last two, if not some of the other ones before that, were pinfall submission type setups, then I think that it's Dexter Lumis.
I really hope that, like, whether it's April, May, whatever, when fans come back, NXT just goes, all right, let's try to recapture the energy of a year and a half ago. Because the idea that pretty soon the world title scene might be Dexter Lumis versus Karrion Kross in like the main event of a takeover does not excite me.
I'm going to go Dexter Lumis, just straight up winning this.
Yeah.
I think Cameron Grimes is now one of those people that has a role in NXT, and his role is to be entertaining and lose.
Yeah, kind of.
And I'm going to agree, Dexter Lumis.
Now, if you are positive or negative when it comes to somebody like a Dexter Lumis, you got a chance to voice your opinions about that coming up soon in the 2020 End of the Year Awards. As Callum's mentioned, that he might have him on some of his worst. I'm not planning on having him on worst or best right now, but who knows what's going to change. So start thinking about what you might want to pick for your best and your worst. There are something around like 80 categories at this point, if you count like best and worst for each category. It's almost every single section has about like from 8 to 10 or 11 like subcategories, and there's like 6 different category things, like umbrella sections. So all that stuff you can find looking back at last year's. I'll maybe put something up on the page to give everybody like a little bit more information. But right now, up on the sidebar of smarkoutmoment.com, and obviously you can find it elsewhere, other fashion things, are the links for it. Well, it's one link this year for the for the awards voting and the audience feedback survey. It's one survey this year where you can vote for the best co-host, or actually I put myself in there this year. I figured, why not? The best host of Smack Talk, and you've got the best and the worst segment for Smark Out Moments. You know, if you're really, really a big fan of, say, Battle of the Brands, or you're just like, man, I really hate play the game, whatever it might be, you get to vote on those things, and we can decide, we can decide, you can decide, and we'll tell you what ended up getting picked at the end of the awards. And there's lots of other types of feedback that would be greatly, greatly appreciated, and stuff that really actually I do take into consideration. So if you got the time at some point over the next couple of weeks, go ahead and fill that out. Fill me in on what you like, what you don't like, what you want to see more of, what you are sick and tired of, and anything else that's happening on the feedback side of things. So that way I can take that information and apply it to 2021 and see how I can do the best possible website and show and everything for you guys. So stay tuned for feedback on the feedback, I guess you could say, later on this month. Go ahead and vote while you can. Let's move over to the triple threat match for the NXT North American Championship. I'm not super down for this, but I'm interested, and it's one of those scenarios where they've got my interest because they did something that I don't think that they should have done, and I wouldn't have done if I were in their shoes. So now I'm wondering where they go from here, and I never would have given the North American title to Leon Ruff right now. I know that that's like, oh my God, wow, they did a title change, and it's this guy that's brand new, and it's this big, like, shaking things up sort of thing. But to me, you got to take that belt off Leon Ruff. I'm sorry. He should not be the champion right now. They're making him a joke. And Gargano and Priest, even if they beat the crap out of each other and Leon Ruff scores some sort of a fluke pin on Gargano or whatever, I don't want that to be the case. I just want one of these two to win the title back.
I like it.
Yeah. Oh, you
am I the oddball out here?
Yeah, because I completely agree with everything that Tony just said.
Well, I'll just say that I like it because it feels different, and NXT has felt really stale for me, just far too stale this year. And Leon Ruff feels special. And yeah, they're booking him like a loser and a joke and a dork. But at least they're building someone new. And quite frankly, unless it's going to go back to Gargano, I kind of think Priest is main roster ready. And I'd rather go back to Gargano. If I had a choice, I'd put it on Gargano, let him have an actual run with the belt because he still hasn't had one. But I like it on Leon Ruff because this is fresh.
I agree with Rob that this is fresh. It's bad. It's like that's the issue. It's the fact that it feels fresh. It feels different because NXT used to protect their championships and they used to give it to people who deserved it rather than make it a joke, because they put it on a joke, and so the title was now a joke. And that is a major issue because this championship used to be this is the thing that Keith Lee won before he then challenged Adam Cole to win the title a couple of months ago. And now it's in the possession of someone who can't even hold it around his waist.
Right.
And it's not even like a slight on Ruff. Ruff works hard, and Ruff was a very good jobber up until this point. But it's just a case of, and if they wanted to build him up, they could have built him up naturally over a couple of months, giving him a few big wins. Then he could have gotten this big victory over Johnny Gargano, and it would have felt a little bit more legitimate and interesting. Right now, it just feels like it's like as soon as Leon Ruff loses that title, which I don't think he will do at WarGames, but when he does lose that title, he's just going to be a guy. It's not like he's been elevated off the back of this. Maybe he's been elevated in the fact that he now gets his own entrance when he comes out, rather than be standing in the ring when the actual star comes out.
Yeah.
So I guess that's an elevation in some way. But other than that, he's going to lose this title. He's going to go back to just being, maybe lose a rematch and then go back to just being a joke who may occasionally get a win over a Jake Atlas or something like that, but will lose against the bigger name people constantly. And it's not like anyone will get more prestige. Wow, they just beat former North American champion Leon Ruff. It's like no one's ever going to say that side of things either.
Well, so the commentary team will. That's the thing. They'll treat it like that's a big deal.
Yeah, no one who has a brain cell will actually care about it. But it's just the case of
Jesus.
For just a one-off like little pop about the idea of like, oh wow, they put the title on Leon Ruff. I think that they've hurt the prestige of the championship in the long run, and they need to go into recovery mode quickly. I don't think it'll be this match because, frankly, I don't really see the point in putting it on either Priest or Gargano again right now, because essentially they're feuding with each other more than they're feuding over the title. But I think whoever the next person is to take on Leon Ruff should take the title. And realistically, based on his size and stature, it should be Timothy Thatcher, because he's a little guy that Timothy Thatcher could bully around.
Now, I will agree with you in that the reputation of the championship is hurt, but I wouldn't put that solely on Ruff. I would put that on...
I don't put it any of it on Ruff. I put it all on the writing team.
Well, I don't put it on... No, I don't put it on solely the Ruff victory. I put it on the last several months have been so sporadic and like, oh, Keith Lee just won the belt and now he's gonna put it up in abeyance. And now, oh, Damian Priest has it. Oh, look, now Gargano has it. Now Leon Ruff. They're hot potatoing it. Again, it goes back to, it's starting to feel a lot like Monday Night Raw, and that's not good.
Well, see, I don't think that is as big of a detriment to it as Ruff being the guy that they went with. Like, I like Ruff as a 205 Live guy or a jobber. To me, he shouldn't be in this position, because if they would have hot potatoed it to somebody else, they could have gotten away with it. Like if, for instance, Danny Burch and Oney Lorcan, they weren't really winning a whole lot, and they beat Breezango, won the tag titles, and they seemed perfectly fine. If Pete Dunne would have randomly gotten into the mix of the North American title and won that as like part of his payment, I don't think anybody would feel anything different about it.
Well,
like,
I think people would be more excited about the idea if it was a guy who we hadn't seen before coming to it. Like,
well,
let's
that
say
too.
It was Kurt Stallion, for instance. Let's say he hasn't done anything on NXT. Maybe he had like one match beforehand, but basically he's an unknown. And if he came in and win, it's just, okay, this guy's just fresh and new. So, but with Leon Ruff, we knew he was a jobber. We knew he was a loser. So that was the issue with it to me. It's just a case of, if you give him someone who's a well-established jobber and loser, then it means the title is now on the a job, like is on a jobber and a loser. It doesn't make me feel like Leon Ruff's a winner now.
I got the perfect guy for you, and I know that Rob's gonna like this idea. You have Johnny Gargano spin that wheel, and he decides he's gonna go with random performance center trainee. And he goes, I don't even know this dude's name. What's your name? And it's Josh Briggs. And Briggs beats Gargano and wins the title.
See, the problem is they wouldn't go with Briggs because Briggs is huge and Briggs would make Gargano look small. The reason they went with Ruff is because Ruff is so thin that it even makes Gargano look like, more of a...
Yeah, but that's the problem with the joke, though, is the problem is Gargano's not a big guy, and you went with one of the smaller guys because, LOL, a guy who shouldn't be champion is the champion, and I don't think that that's helpful. Whereas I think you get similar vibes, but not to anybody's detriment if he just goes, oh, look, it landed on the wheel, the part that says Performance Center recruit. Fine, any of you people in the Performance Center, if you want a shot, go ahead and come out here. I'll beat any of your asses. You're a bunch of no-names. Like, he doesn't even pick the person. And Briggs is the guy that comes out. He's just like, who the fuck are you? You're actually kind of big. And he's like, I'm your opponent. Like, that kind of like that John Cena, slap in the face, ruthless aggression type of scenario, but much to a lesser extent. And then Briggs is like, well, I don't want to fight this dude. That's not the type of guy I wanted to fight. I wanted to fight one of the smaller guys, like that kind of thing. And he loses the title. He's like, no, I never picked Josh Briggs. I picked any like NXT recruit type of thing. I never got to pick the person. And that could be what he complains to Regal about, instead of that doesn't count just because he lost. Like, I think you get the same sort of thing. Like, that's where my pitch would have been if I would have been on the writing team, and I would have been like, yeah, but can we do it this way where it goes to somebody we can invest in, instead of the joke is that guy shouldn't be champion. And it seems what they wanted to go with. So they probably would have said, no, fuck you. That's not what we want. But I don't think that helps. And I don't think that Leon Ruff holding this title any further is going to help it anymore either. I think that the sooner he drops it, the better. And if he doesn't just drop it back to one of these two guys at TakeOver, he needs to drop it the next episode of NXT. And that could be to Austin Theory. Like, he could step in and do that. It could be, I don't know, Joaquin Wilde. It could be Mansoor. It doesn't really matter. I think that there are plenty of better options than Leon Ruff. And Leon Ruff's not bad. It's just a matter of he's booked to look like a loser. And I don't think that having a champion as, like, the loser belt is good.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that it goes to one of those two other guys. And if it does, I'm leaning a little bit more towards Gargano wins. I do think that Priest may go up to the main roster at some point next year. But then again, if they just go with Priest, it wouldn't shock me, because then it would just be like, all right, well, we did this in the meantime. Now he's a 2-time champion or whatever. Ultimately, I have to say that probably they gave it to Ruff for a reason, and they're probably going to go with Ruff. I don't want that to be the case, though.
Overall, this goes with my whole theme of the podcast, and that's NXT needs to rehab.
Well, who's your pick?
I'm going with Leon Ruff overall.
Yeah, Leon Ruff will retain.
I hope we're all wrong.
I don't want him to. Yeah.
You know for a fact that Gargano and Priest are going to knock each other out, and Ruff is just going to crawl in and pin somebody.
Something like that, most likely.
Priest.
To be fair, he's defeating champion because his surname is quite an epitome of what NXT feels like right now. Ruff.
It is Ruff.
It's not my favorite show to watch, though.
You know, I mean, that's because you're not watching AEW.
That's because you skipped through Dynamite. Like,
I do think the Dynamite's going to be a much better show tonight. By the way, this Winter is Coming
you're not
special.
allowed to skip tonight. Like, let's just put this out there. You're not allowed to skip.
I'm totally going to skip some segments. There's going to be some segments.
It's all right. If Miro's on the screen, you're totally fine to skip it. But just like,
yep.
But make sure you're there for the main event at the very least.
Yeah, the Omega thing I'm definitely having to watch. Although I will say, if I know who wins by the end of it, I'm going to be a lot less interested, just, from a matter of being like, oh, okay, now I know the champion changes or it doesn't or whatever. So I'm going to try not to get into the spoiler side of things and just flat out watch it. But we'll see. Do you guys have any predictions for that? You think Omega's winning?
I think Omega has to win. I think Omega... I think, first of all, I think Kenta's going to cost Jon Moxley and Omega wins it.
I mean, we've already been told that by Tony Khan that Moxley's not going to Wrestle Kingdom.
I think Tony Khan is full of shit on that one. I think he's throwing out the red herring.
Me too. I think he's saying that, and then it'll be like, yeah, well, you know what? Plans changed because like the Kenta thing or whatever, and I guess he is gonna go. Like that. I think he's trying to preserve that.
How hot he got when somebody brought up the Miro thing, and he was like, "Yeah, well, people are assholes because WWE treated him like shit." And
what?
Like he got so upset because I think it was Kenny McIntosh asked, "How would you like to respond to the criticism of Miro of his booking?" And he was just like, "Yeah, well, you know, yeah, he came out in a tank at WrestleMania, but that was 5 years ago. And I signed somebody who was completely kicked in the nuts and abused, and we're rehabbing him, and he's gonna do great things for us." Like he got really intense about the booking of Miro.
And then we're rehabbing him. We're whatever. How you doing that?
Well, I mean, I can't say I blame him for wanting to be defensive of his own product. I mean, surely you would be. It's like if you think the same that like either of you guys are doing, like you put a great art together and say somebody just immediately in the comments is telling you just like it sucks all the time, and everyone else is saying it sucks when you thought that you'd done some really good work. It even means, okay, what I did wasn't great, and you have to reflect and have a look at that side of things, which I'm sure he's doing, or you have to go on the defensive about it and say, I actually think I did some pretty good work here. And if he wants to go defensive, he's well within his rights to do so.
No, I think it's like, you're right, he's well within his rights to defend his product. I just believe that it's so interesting to see the top executive of a company get so fired up about it, because we're not used to seeing that.
I don't disagree with standing up for yourself. I just disagree with standing up for this because I think he's wrong.
Oh yeah, I completely agree that the Miro stuff is bad, but it's just a case of he's well within his rights to defend it. If he's not, I just kind of feel that's quite interesting that that's the one that he goes off on as well. Is the Miro character? It's not like, was he getting criticized about the women's division stuff as well, and was he just like batting that stuff away? And the Miro thing comes up, and he's just like, oh my god, how can not people just not love this guy wearing Hawaiian shirts and playing video games all the time rather than being a fucking brutal killer like he was in the early stages of WWE. It's just, yeah.
But
he's tried though. He's a guy who's just been kicked in the nuts repeatedly over the past 2 years, so he's not wrong about that.
No, I agree with that. But I definitely think Omega wins. I think Kenta costs Moxley, and then Moxley's forced to, say, I made Tony let me go to Japan so that I can kick some ass.
I think Omega's winning as well, but I don't know about the Tokyo Dome thing right now.
What's kind of funny is it's funny when somebody like vehemently defends their idea, and it's like, I don't know, I get the kind of same sort of feeling as like, it's one thing if you've got like opinions are opinions. Some people love anything in particular that a lot of other people hate. You got to put that preface out there. Some people, I'm sure Miro is like really into this character or whatever. Maybe Lana really is into it. Kip Sabian might be really into it. Tony Khan clearly likes it. I think a lot of people are just sort of like, this is dumb, knock it off. And it's funny when people defend that kind of stuff and they sort of just call attention to other bad things instead. Like, this is a tangent, but I'm going to go off on it for just a moment. Because I haven't had my Fanboys Anonymous fix recently. But if you don't know what Fanboys Anonymous is, go to that website, fanboysanonymous.com. That's the geek culture site. So on the movie side of things, I read an article last night or night before or whatever that they were talking about the most recent Terminator movie. That was awful. Just a horrendous piece of fucking trash. And I think it was Mackenzie Davis, the one who's like the Terminator in that one, that she was asked like, how would you respond to the idea that like this movie was fucking garbage, and in a nicer way, the person that said that, and like it bombed compared to what you thought it was going to do and nobody fucking liked it. And instead of saying, yeah, well, it was a shit movie and a bad idea, and we started off with like working on this like terrible discussion of like, how do we take the franchise? Her justification for why people didn't want to go see the movie and nobody liked it was, well, other movies before it were bad, so maybe people just thought that the sixth one wasn't going to be good either. It's like, no, people saw it and it also sucked. And that's the problem. And if it would have been good, then people would have liked it. And then everybody would have been talking about how great it is. That's how things work. If something's good enough, people like it. And then you don't have people say that they hate it. That's just how it goes, you know? Like, so it's the whole, like, Tony Khan sitting there going, yeah, well, WWE kicked them in the balls. Yeah. And you have them playing video games. That doesn't make it any better. It's just sort of, they did a shit job with them, for sure. Yeah. I agree, Tony. But you're doing a shit job too, and if WWE got him back and said, we fixed it because now he's not playing dumb video games or whatever, they would be well in their right to say that, and you'd be the one that looks like an idiot. You know, like, that's just how that works, you know, and I think that's funny. Anyway, fanboysnotanonymous.com, if you want to hear me rant more about how Dark Fate is absolute garbage film, then...
Well, I feel like we're going from one set of rants into another because next match we're discussing is the Women's WarGames, is it not?
Yeah, because we do have the 2 WarGames matches, and last year, I think, from my memory at the very least, too, yeah, obviously by my memory, if I didn't remember it, I wouldn't be able to call back on that, but if I remember correctly, I liked the Women's WarGames match better last year. I kind of remember being like, that was like maybe one of my top picks for match of the year, actually. This year, I don't think that that's going to be the case, but that's not to say that this is a bad match in any stretch of the imagination. The 8 women that are going to be a part of this are pretty damn great. I mean, there's one that doesn't fit the mold as much. Everybody knows TBA is never all that great. No. But
you're going to put Raquel in the same as
the one that's the
odd one out in this thing.
Yeah,
Raquel's gonna
She's been great this year.
Raquel's gonna fucking kick ass in this thing, Tony. What are you talking about?
Well, you kind of didn't let me finish that one. She's the one that's out of the mix with that, but this is the best that Raquel has ever looked by far. She was terrible in the Mae Young Classic, and she has progressed considerably. So compared to like Dakota Kai and Rhea Ripley and Io Shirai, who she's gonna be the final person, and Toni Storm, she's not on their level. But if Raquel is the lowest of this, it's a damn good group of 8 people. That's where I'm getting at.
I'm super excited for this match. This match is going to be...
It's going to rock.
I don't know. I don't know if it will be as good as last year's one, but with the talent they've got involved in it, it definitely has the potential to be on par with it.
I think it might be better, actually.
It could very well be, because this is definitely the top 8 women they have in their promotion right now, just all involved in this big heated rivalry, which makes sense to a degree. I know they've hot-shotted Toni Storm into the heel because they couldn't trust putting Indi Hartwell in this match, and I think they're right to do so. Quite frankly, the fact that she's not ready for this sort of match yet, and Toni Storm's heel makes good sense to me in the sense that, well, you've got to take that title off Io Shirai eventually. Why not Toni Storm as a heel? That seems to make more sense to me than giving a shot to just a random babyface at some point.
I don't think it's a hot shot, though.
I think this is the plan.
This was the plan, I think, way back. Because in NXT UK, she was leaning towards heel. And for this whole stretch of the pandemic where they weren't doing anything, I had her down as babyface leaning towards heel. She hasn't quite transitioned to a tweener yet, but she's kind of in that range. And they didn't get a chance to do it because they didn't do NXT UK. But I feel like last year, towards the end of last year, they were like, okay, Toni, you're going to turn heel in 2020.
I don't agree that might have been the case. I think they hot-shotted it in the way they actually did it.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of rushed that at the last minute. That's true.
Yeah, I think if they had that as like their long-term plan, they should have brought her back as a babyface maybe for 1 or 2 matches, and then have her turn heel immediately afterwards. Just a case of she came back. She just well, no, she had like a good number of matches, and then she just turned heel randomly last week. They hadn't really done any sort of laying the groundwork for that, because she'd already lost matches to. Didn't she lose a match to Candice as well? So like she'd already lost a match to the people that she's now teaming with, and I think if that was the long-term goal, they wouldn't have had them interact that much.
See, that was the mistake. The mistake was when you both announced Ember and Toni are coming in, just turn Toni immediately. I don't know why they waited on that, but I mean, I like this.
If I would have been, benefit of hindsight and all that, I think I would have rather not Toni Storm pop up at the same time as the Ember Moon thing, and it would have been just Ember Moon, and then maybe they do a whole thing where it's like Candice and Dakota and Indi and Raquel are all beaten down on Ember Moon and whatever, and it's like Toni Storm comes out and it's like, oh my god, Toni Storm's gonna help save the day, and she joins in, and they're just like, oh fuck, she's another heel. I think that would have been a little bit better, but I do think it's a better idea to have Toni Storm in here than Indi Hartwell. And
Absolutely.
that's not a slight on Indi Hartwell. I think she's got positives to her, but she would be then the lowest on the totem pole, and if you can put a Toni Storm in there instead, that's an upgrade. So can't deny that. Team Shotzi is Ember Moon, Rhea Ripley, and it's going to be Io Shirai. And Team Candice is Candice, Dakota Kai, Raquel Gonzalez, and Toni Storm. This feud is revolving around the idea that Candice destroyed Shotzi's tank, and she's rebuilding a new one, which hoping that looks pretty badass.
As long as it holds 4 people, okay, and she just drives the tank and she has the whole team with her in the tank, that would be awesome.
Now, the last time that WWE had a tank that could fit more than one person in it, they had sex in it. Lana and Rusev apparently fucked at WrestleMania. So
I think that's good for him.
Is Lana just going to be like, hey, Rusev, come back and visit? We got another tank.
No, I think they got to keep the first tank as a souvenir.
They're like, yeah, you ruined this one.
If they have sex in the tank, does it come out the cannon?
Well, they really don't have enough room for all of this at the Capital Wrestling Center.
Well, I mean, having said that this match is going to absolutely rule just because of the people involved, I just think that it's funny that a WarGames match, like one of the most destructive matches in wrestling history, is being built around the fact that someone ran over a toy tank.
And okay, so this is where I get like, this is stupid. And if the main roster did this, they would be stupid. And this is not the way you get to a WarGames match. And I feel like, yes, at the end of the day, this match is going to kick all kinds of ass and nobody's going to care about the build and blah, blah, blah. We all know that the NXT Women's Division is awesome. Okay? But the idea that it is now the precedent that there must be a women's WarGames. So how did we get there? I don't know. She destroyed her toy, and then Shotzi has a meltdown, and now she's playing with power tools. And on top of that, Shotzi's the lowest ranking member of her team. It's the NXT Women's Champion, Rhea Ripley, who competed at WrestleMania, and Ember Moon, who's competed at WrestleMania.
Well, 3 former women's, and the current women's champion and Shotzi.
Champions, yeah.
But Shotzi's got the tank, and she's the one that's going to say welcome to the ball pit and all that,
Yeah, and all of that's great. And like I said, this match is going to kick ass. It's just, please don't start doing this thing that we all hate with TLC and Hell in a Cell, where it's like, it's WarGames, and now we've established that women have to compete as well, so we're going to find a way to force them in there.
I kind of feel like, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but it's just a case of both WarGames feuds feel rushed.
No, this sucks. This feels like, hey, we need to do WarGames.
Yeah, it's the same trap that WWE always finds stuff coming into. It's like, Survivor Series is coming around, better drop every single storyline and start concentrating on the brand warfare. Extreme Rules coming around, better have someone go through a table randomly in one episode so we can build towards tables matches and break out the Singapore Canes under the ring and stuff like that. It's just, everything is very, very, again, it's just a case of everything's so structured, and it's bad sort of structure because they're very unstructured creatively, but then they're so rigid to their calendar. It means that there's no chance for like these sort of matches to build up organically or anything like that, because they just pop up when they pop up on the calendar, and you start building towards it when it's a couple of weeks out from it's time to come and do the WarGames or the Elimination Chamber or Hell in a Cell, rather than these things popping up as and when they're needed to.
See, I'm not as down on this as you guys are. I think that, I mean, I fully agree. I absolutely hate that it's, all right, it's the end of September. What are we going to do for Hell in a Cell? I hate that with a passion. Hell in a Cell is one of those pay-per-views that should not happen as a pay-per-view. TLC is another one. I mean, again, we'll get into the whole fact that TLC doesn't even exist. But the like you shouldn't go, okay, well now we'll talk about this later on, but I'll say it right now. The Lana thing, they've done enough that if that's not a tables match, they are just beyond stupid. That has to be a tables match. But they've done that for weeks and weeks now where I feel like that's okay. If they do Roman Reigns against Kevin Owens and it's suddenly a chairs match just because he starts using a chair, that's dumb as all hell. And I hate when they do that kind of stuff because they're literally just doing it because it's TLC. And I don't think that should happen with a lot of things. I don't think that should be like, well, it's November, so WarGames happens. And that's just how they go. I think that the Survivor Series thing is a little bit different because they can just sort of at any moment say, well, this is when we're doing our annual whatever. They just happen to not book it all that well. And then something like the Royal Rumble and the Elimination Chamber, I feel like those are perfect the way that they are. It's just a matter of WWE not necessarily booking them as well as they should, where it's like, all right, at the beginning of the year, there is the Royal Rumble. Everybody's focus goes towards that. It's weird when they start booking feuds that happen to work with that. The way it's like, okay, everybody's kind of feuding with each other and it just happens to be Elimination Chamber time and they can all fight. I think it's better when it's just like, now we're establishing Elimination Chamber. The same as like Money in the Bank, where it's like, nope, we're having qualifying matches and that's going to lead to a match. And it doesn't matter what feuds are going on right now. Maybe they'll overlap, maybe they won't. It is annoying when it's just like, all right, now we have to get into the such and such match. Suddenly everybody's going to use kendo sticks because it's a kendo stick match. That stuff's dumb. And with the Undisputed Era thing, I don't feel like there's enough of a build for that to be WarGames necessarily, because that's just, okay, they've wrestled WarGames matches and now it's WarGames time, so they're going to do it in that. Otherwise, it would have just been an 8-man tag. And the Shotzi and Candice thing, I feel like it's almost a little bit more justified because they've had at least something WarGames-ish with the tank that makes it a little bit more like, all right, Shotzi is kind of pissed about this whole thing and she's going to go a little crazy because she's a little crazy. She wants a WarGames match. She was the one with the spinning the wheel. She is like a more edgy type of character, so she would be like, yeah, let's fight in a fucking cage, like, let's go for it. It's not the best, but I'm okay with it. I think that that's kind of as well as they could do, because what else would they do? Have it be that they all just fight each other and attack each other, and they do that like they do that with everything else. At least the tank's a tank,
Realistic, yeah. I mean, I get what you're saying with that, and this is better than some of the things they've done in the past. But realistically, what I'd expect is if you've got a pay-per-view, this WarGames coming up in November, December time, you start the build for it in August at the latest, and you really start like hammering it home, like try and build a lot of animosity between all the people involved.
Yeah.
Whereas this one feels like, okay, she ran over your toy tank. And prior to like that happening, we had no idea why that toy tank was important. Like, we didn't even know why she came out driving a toy tank. It's just like,
right.
So there needs to be some sort of concept. If you knew that was going to be your big like catalyst for this feud, then tell us like a couple of months ago, previous to that, like, why does she drive in with a toy tank? Why does the toy tank mean a huge amount to her? Why have someone like either steal or abuse the toy tank beforehand, and so she gets annoyed about it, and so you built up that sort of character trait with it. So then when it's destroyed, then you like say, oh god, they destroyed that tank that meant so much to Shotzi. Yeah. So then it's WarGames. So it's not a case like, yes, they've done a better job with it. It still doesn't mean it's a good job.
Yeah,
something they should have thought about a lot more. Yeah, so that's the issue that I have with it. It's not the case of, again, the match itself would be great, so I can't really complain too much. But
it could have been
just
better.
Feels like, and the issue is that with WarGames in particular, that is different than all these other gimmicks that have like a time of the year attached to. Is that WarGames always had a time of the year attached to it because it was always the Fall Brawl match or something to that extent. It was always done at the same time of year. So WCW had a blueprint of and again, it's like
still doesn't make it a good one, but you're right. They had a blueprint.
Yeah, no, but they're saying that WCW used to have a way of doing that, and the way they used to do it was very straightforward. Is that they would always have big factions that made sense to put them in war games against each other.
TNA was the best at this with the lethal lockdown stuff. They always had a faction to go anyway, so it always made sense.
The thing is, or at least with NXT side of things, they've got the Kings of Wrestling and Undisputed Era on one side, whereas these two teams are a bit like thrown together teams of just, okay, these are our 8 best women, so let's just the 4 that are on the heel side and the 4 that are on the babyface side, and let's have them fight. Whereas at least in the other one, there is a bit of, okay, these are 2 factions that are teaming up with each other and have established that way. The only issue being that like the Kings of Wrestling only existed like a month and a half ago or whatever, so there hasn't really been much time for them to build up a reputation before throwing them immediately into war games.
Is that what they're calling themselves? Kings of Wrestling?
They're calling that
Kings NXT. Kings NXT.
Yeah. I think, like, for example, the women in Hell in a Cell, they did Charlotte and Sasha in 2016, right? And then they didn't do it again for another 3 years. I think, like, that makes it feel special. And I just don't want to get into a situation where, okay, well, they're going to get in WarGames every year because it's the seasonal thing. Especially when it's the women, because there's still so much untapped potential there, make it mean more instead of just doing it to do it.
I mean, I certainly don't subscribe to the idea that the women should have less of these matches than the men just because the men are more associated with it.
Right.
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that it's like you have the ability to make it special again. Unfortunately, with the men, it's already ruined. Like, Hell in a Cells can never recapture the glory of Hell in a Cell. But you can still make it mean more when women go inside Hell in a Cell because there's not as much of a precedent as it doesn't mean anything. It's just another match.
I can see where you're coming from, but from my perspective, it's more a case just the match itself is ruined. So it doesn't matter if you're men, women, or anything else like that. It's kind of just like they've already taken away the mystique of the match in general. So
yeah, you're right there.
Everything would be better if they actually tried to plan it out ahead of time and stuck to their guns, because they seem to be very into the idea of telling people that if they're not patient, that they're not understanding that long-term storyline telling is what they want to do. Yet they don't actually have any long-term plans because they throw out the script 10, 20 minutes before the actual show starts. Whereas something like, you can't tell me Seth Rollins and that Rey Mysterio feud was be patient, long-term storytelling. You guys are just not giving us credit. We have ideas in mind. We're going to rush it at the last minute and just do that. No, everything would be better if they actually planned it out ahead of time and built towards it. But I'm digging these 2 matches.
Yeah, and it would be so much better as well if they had a calendar which wasn't just littered with certain special event pay-per-views where they had to just do something and they can let things form naturally rather than...
Yeah.
But yeah, so those 2 things, they need to be more creative with the long-term storytelling and they need to be less confined by their own stupid calendar they put together.
They need to put in more work. Is what they need to do and stop getting in their own way. But I do think that both of these matches are going to be great. Undisputed Era against the Kings of NXT, Pat McAfee, Pete Dunne, Danny Burch, and Oney Lorcan. I do think that there's a chance that the women's match this year is better than the last one. I'm not holding out hope that happens, but I think that there's a chance. And I think that there's probably not much of a chance that the Undisputed Era match lives up to that other kind of a hype. Just it's kind of hard. Both these matches have a lot of potential, and they both could be great. And they both could be match of the year candidates and everything. And I'm anticipating that I'm going to love both. But I do feel like a portion of what's going to hurt these is literally just the lack of the crowd. And if you would take the same matches, most likely, maybe they're going to be train wrecks. I don't know. But I think that at the end of the day, we're going to look back and we're going to go, crap, if you took the exact same match and you put it in front of a crowd, it'd be better than the other ones. And it just isn't going to match that because we won't have that natural crowd. So I'm a little bit worried about that. But, I mean, at this point, we've had hundreds and hundreds of matches in front of nobody. It's just a thing. And you can't get any better than what they've got going on right now. So it is what it is. And at least the performer side of things, they're going to do a hell of a job. I'm anticipating Team Shotzi and the Undisputed Era to win, but it wouldn't be all that crazy for me to go with Team Candice winning instead, and that leading towards Toni Storm being able to fight Io Shirai.
Nope. It's WarGames. Baby faces must win. That's the rule. So, Team Shotzi.
Yeah, it's not like they've broken that rule. Like the first WarGames match they ever did was.
But then they reestablished that rule in every year after. So, I think it's pretty safe.
I'm going with Team Candice winning, with Toni Storm getting a pin over Io Shirai to cement her as the next number one contender, and Undisputed Era winning because that'll be the main event, and they'll want to end it off with the babyface team winning. And there's no shame in Pat McAfee taking a pinfall.
Yeah, I'm leaning much more towards the Undisputed Era. Shotzi and Candice, I think it's a little bit dicey, but it's also kind of weird because we don't know what the hell they're doing with Rhea Ripley. I don't think they know what they're doing with Rhea Ripley.
Rhea Ripley has said that she doesn't know what they're doing with Rhea Ripley because she said, I was waiting to get drafted and it just didn't happen.
Yeah, I still feel like they want her to be on the main roster and they're waiting for Charlotte Flair to come back. And I don't know why Charlotte Flair isn't back yet. So that's a little strange. But maybe they do something where they rush towards the beginning of the year. Maybe Charlotte comes back and wins the title at Royal Rumble and Rhea Ripley wins the Royal Rumble and they do that. And this is just like a holdover pattern with Ripley just kind of just hanging out in the meantime. And if that's the case, then maybe Ripley doesn't get pinned in any fashion here, or well, it's not elimination. It's I'm thinking, why am I thinking it's elimination?
It's a single pinfall, yeah.
Yeah. So they can have her team lose and Ripley not take a loss. It could be Toni Storm pins CEO. It could be, I mean, whatever it might be. But then again, it's kind of hard to rationalize that Team Shotzi doesn't win because they're the ones going into this with Shotzi being like, you fucked up my tank. They should have
they all have a grudge. You know, Ember got turned on by Toni. Rhea got beat up, and they even laid out the champion. It would be very weird if they didn't get their revenge.
And Toni can still become a number one contender through whatever the next means would be. Like, it could be like Dakota Kai takes this pin. We're probably better off Shotzi pins Candice to get full-on revenge. And then Toni Storm, they just have like some kind of fight in the next episode. And then it's like, you know what? Okay, well, we're going to have like a number one contenders match and it's Toni Storm against Ember Moon. And
I love her to death, but it's not like Candice LeRae eating a pinfall will change anything dramatically.
No. So you know what? I'm actually going to go Team Shotzi and Undisputed Era. Changing my mind.
Oh, look at that.
We didn't really talk about the Undisputed Era one.
I mean,
it's great.
The feud itself, yeah.
It's
the match would be great. The people involved were great. I think it's an interesting tactic that they went with to basically have the Undisputed Era pretty much absent for most of this build. Just like had them all taken out by supposedly Lorcan and Burch, and obviously Cole was originally taken out by
Ridge
Holland. But I wonder what Ridge Holland's role was going to be in this match. I don't know whether he was going to take the McAfee role or whether I heard discussions saying that Lorcan and Burch were like the last minute substitutions. So maybe there was going to be a fourth guy that wasn't one of those two in it. So that would have been interesting. But I think this match would be interesting just because I want to see what Pat McAfee does
inside the cage.
Because, I mean, they've shown already that he's had a one-on-one match with Adam Cole, and he held his own in that match. He was beaten, but he held his own. So he's not going to be someone who's just carrying in the corner constantly or anything like that. He's going to be getting involved a lot. I'm just wondering, what is he going to do from the top of the cage? Because he will do something from the top of the cage.
I think Holland was supposed to fight Balor.
Maybe.
No, because I think if Holland was there, either Dunne was coming in to fight Balor, or
it would have been
well, these 4 guys, and if the Undisputed Era wins, Adam Cole gets time in the cage with Pat McAfee. I don't think that they had any major plans outside of what we saw. I do have one issue. You guys are like, oh, I don't think Indi Hartwell is ready for WarGames, and Pat McAfee is.
Yeah, Pat McAfee's great.
Yeah, I've seen one match with Pat McAfee, and he did 2 or 3 times as much as I've seen in any of Indi Hartwell's matches. So
Yeah.
Indi Hartwell is green as hell, and Pat McAfee showed me in one match that he's good. He knows what he's doing already.
Fair enough, I guess.
Indi's got a lot of potential.
She's got potential, but she's not ready yet.
Pat McAfee's the type that he came in and was like, holy shit, you know?
Like Indi Hart was the sort of person that NXT is actually for, in terms of like it needs to actually develop as part of the developmental territory that it was supposedly meant to be at the start. Whereas the other guys in that match are all people that could be on the main roster and would already be better wrestlers than some of the people already on the main roster.
You know,
that's the difference.
This brings up one topic that I completely forgot, skipped over. They've been doing this whole thing with Indi Hartwell being the ghost face, and she took off the mask and whatever. It wasn't really her, but she was part of the whole COVID thing, so they thankfully got around that, and it was Indi Hartwell that was helping Candice LeRae win, all that. But they've still had somebody else with Johnny Gargano.
It's Austin Theory. Yeah, it's Austin Theory.
Did they say that? Because he's
it's obviously Austin Theory, because they did a segment. And again, this is probably shows just how much of I just pay attention and retain this information and stuff like that, because I can't expect everyone to retain this stuff. But they did a segment, one of those Johnny Gargano, Candice LeRae at home segments, where they basically said that Johnny Gargano looks at Austin Theory competing or sort and says, I see a lot in that kid. I see a lot of potential. And they've done the segment where Austin Theory's left. And so I think that they're kind of building up this whole Gargano family thing with those two as the kids. Indi Hartwell as Candice LeRae's Candice LeRae's like thing to mold, and Austin Theory will be Johnny Gargano's understudy for a while.
So
my favorite promo on the whole road to this was Candice LeRae going, "Look at her, she's basically my daughter." I think that's hysterical. Callum gets it.
What's the age difference between them?
Probably like 10 years.
Let's see.
It wouldn't surprise me if it was quite low.
Candice LeRae is 35. 35? Really?
Yeah.
She's older than I am. That's weird. Didn't think that was the case. And Indi Hartwell is... I can't see her birthday anywhere. So no idea. I don't know. Maybe she's 12. It's just... I did not know about this Austin Theory thing. That must have... I must have just not heard that in that promo, or I forgot about it.
21. Wow.
Well, I mean, almost. 214. Yeah, people have had that. That Austin Theory thing then calls even more attention to the idea that Leon Ruff retains and could drop it to Austin Theory. So go back on that one. Leon Ruff definitely retains. Oh, I said Leon Ruff anyway. But
she's 24, by the way.
That ruins it then. Yeah, I'm gonna go Undisputed Era here. Pat McAfee's group is fantastic, but they can lose. Adam Cole can pin Pat McAfee. Kyle O'Reilly can pin Pete Dunne. Whatever it is, I think it'd be better if Pat McAfee took the pinfall. But that's gonna be great. Shotzi and Candice think that that's gonna be great too. I'm looking forward to this. I mean, the strap match is gonna be a little hokey. And I don't think that the triple threat for the North American title is going to work out all that well, but I do think that the WarGames matches at the end of the day are going to be good enough that we're going to be like, all right, yeah, rock solid pay-per-view overall.
Yeah, I think it'll be carried by the 2 WarGames matches. The other 3 matches, like Ciampa and Thatcher, if they put that on, they'll be pretty good. The other 2 matches don't really excite me all that much. So yeah, I think if the WarGames matches deliver as I'm hoping they will do, then it'll overall go down as a very good pay-per-view.
Yeah, and you can't miss with WarGames. And NXT, as much as I've not liked them this year, it'll be good. And next year they will rehab and they will be back to normal once again.
Alrighty, everybody, that is the WarGames preview. Of course, as I mentioned before, tell us your thoughts on what you think is going to happen. We're going to do our normal setup afterward and do our post-show and review everything that does go down. We're not going to do that for Tribute to the Troops because that's happening earlier in the day, and by that time, we'll have already been trying to watch the NXT show. I think that's like happening at like 4 or 5 o'clock or so, so we'd be like pretty much right going into NXT, and I don't feel like doing the editing, and I don't think anybody really cares all that much about like a full-on post-show of Tribute to the Troops and go, oh, the country singer sang, and it was annoying, that kind of a thing. But when we find out more information about that, we'll talk about that on the hot tags leading up to that show on Friday night. That'll be the next episode of this podcast that you hear from us. And that'll also include any changes to the NXT card if they do end up having to change anything. We know that there was a positive COVID test, and it's not supposed to be necessarily interfering with this card. But maybe they do change something here and there. Maybe they do confirm a different match instead of the Thatcher and Ciampa match. Maybe they tweak something. Maybe it's, I highly doubt it, but maybe it's not Io Shirai who's that final member of the team. If any of those changes happen, I'll give you an update on the hot tags, and we'll talk about.
Be Xia Li. She needs to win.
I mean, she does need a win, and she did promise Shifu that she wasn't going to lose and everything. So, very curious to see where they go in that direction too. But we'll talk about that when the time comes. Another quick plug that I want to mention is the merchandise shops. You've got TeePublic and you got Redbubble. And if you check them out for Smark Out Moment, for Fanboys and On, and with the A Mango Tees side of things, you got lots of deals going on right now. So if you want to pick up some merch, go ahead and check them out. You can find links all over the place. And if not, ask me and I'll send you a link somewhere else. Just tweet me or something. I talked about the applause thing, the membership thing, Facebook and Twitter and everything. We don't have anything else with the Champs Giving and all that. We talked about the feedback and everything. So I'm pretty sure that that's all of my plugs, but I'm going to pass the baton over to these guys so they can plug things too. Rob, what do you want to toss out?
Yeah, so I will be over on Fightful.com all WarGames weekend. I'll probably do live coverage of Tribute to the Troops as well, because why not? And look, it'll be a fun weekend. Let's all enjoy it. Subscribe to Fightful Select to get those scoops. Maybe we find out who had COVID. Who knows? Just check out everything I got going on at Dude Felice on Twitter. And I'm going to toss you over to Callum, who's going to explain what Paul Heyman's SmackDown podcast is.
Well, if you don't know already, the Paul Heyman SmackDown podcast is when me and Rob go back to the year 2002, check out all of the episodes of SmackDown that Paul Heyman was the head writer for. Coming up on this edition is main evented by a banger fatal four-way elimination match between Kurt Angle, Edge, Chris Benoit, and Eddie Guerrero for the number one contendership for the WWE Championship at Armageddon. So that'll be the big headline thing we'll be talking about. So make sure you're tuning in on Saturdays when all those episodes drop. And then, of course, we've got more stuff building up towards Armageddon, and we will do the Armageddon pay-per-view review itself on Patreon available for everyone who's at the Dark Cast tier or above. Dark Task tier. That's what I was going to say if I just can't get my letters the right way around.
Cast your darks.
Yeah.
It's
Other than that, you can follow me on Twitter at Wigmaster14. Check out all the articles on smartcomoment.com, including my contribution to the power rankings, but make sure you don't skip out on all of the other weekly stuff as well, and check out what the standings are in the Fantasy League right now as well.
I'm still losing.
that's one guarantee at this point. And I've got my usual stuff going on eWrestling News and Bleacher Report and here and there and everything. I do really, really want to do more Fanboys Anonymous content. So if you are kind of getting that itch of wanting to hear more rants about Terminator, or I've been really in a Bond kick lately. The two main things that I've been harping on is Bond and Power Rangers of all things. I have no idea why. So I've been working a lot on the Power Rangers blueprint and doing the weird, crazy stuff. I get Phil and Rob every once in a while about how it's okay, this person's got this horrible trauma in this story or whatever. I'm really making it this dark kind of thing, but I don't know if that's going to manifest in a Fanboys article or a podcast or something. I do know I have more James Bond stuff that I wanted to get at. I recently just went back and I realized that I hadn't added some the X-Men films to the X-Men power ranking list. So I went back and I kind of positioned Logan, Deadpool 2, and the absolutely atrocious New Mutants and Dark Phoenix in there. So check that out. Check out anything else that's happening on fanboysanonymous.com. And if you want more of that, then hit up the Patreon for fanboys, just the same as you would for Smark Out Moment. Hit the like button, the follow button, all the other buttons, and show your support over there. And if you just stay tuned, you follow me at A Mango Tree, everything else that's happening underneath that shade, and just at Toni Mango, then you will see whatever's happening and whatever I'm got cooking up. I don't know. I'll give you a plate. And for now, we will just call this a podcast. That's it. We'll see you next time, everybody. This has been another Smark Out Moment, and we're being counted out.